Whew! I just got finished with my very first wedding of 2019. How did it go? Well, let's talk about it. Alright, so as I have mentioned yesterday a few times in yesterday's video, as well as probably a few videos in a couple weeks or days prior, I don't know, I mentioned that my cousin was getting married today and he wanted me to do photo and video for his wedding. That may sound like a lot because it is kind of strange for one person to do both the photography and the videography for a whole wedding, especially given the fact that now wedding videography and wedding photography are on a much different level than what they were in years prior. It sounds like a very daunting task, which it kind of is. And I was asked by my cousin to do both the photo and the video for the wedding, and of course I said yes. Now, I want to make it clear moving forward a couple of things, that this is not my very first time doing photo or video for a wedding. I actually have probably one wedding under my belt as a wedding photographer, and I have close to 13 or 14 different weddings under my belt for wedding videography. So today was not my first rodeo, but it was the very first time, mind you, that I was doing both photo and video at the same time for the same wedding for the bride and the groom. Normally, I'm used to doing photo and video for my DJ buddies who just need some marketing material for their companies or for their brand. And so that kind of photo and video doesn't require as much attention as photo and video for the bride and the groom does. Let me stress that enough. It is on a totally, and I mean a totally different level. So another thing to keep in mind is that this was not an average wedding. It was a wedding that probably lasted a total of maybe 2.5 hours. That includes the setup, that includes the bride and groom prep, that includes the pictures, the ceremony, and not the reception, because the reception was more of like an after dinner. But bottom line, this was just a very small, peaceful, quiet ceremony with no more than like 30 people involved. And that is kind of why I think that the photo and video aspect of this is not as daunting as what you would think maybe like an 8 or a 10-hour wedding day would be. Because let me tell you, if somebody had asked me, Mark, I want you to do both the photo and the video for my wedding, and by the way, it is going to take the whole day, I would say, that ain't happening. It's either one or the other. Preferably video because I have more experience with the video, but I do know a thing or two about wedding photography, I guess. But there is no way at all, that I could do both photo and the video just one person for an 8 to 10 hour wedding day. That ain't happening. But with that even being said, for just 2.5, close to 3 hours, it was not easy. So yesterday I mentioned that I was trying to plan out in my head what my setup was going to be because I was doing both photo and video, so I needed to figure out what are my video cameras, what are my photo cameras. So this was the basic rundown of my setup for today's event. For video, I went ahead and I used the Canon M50 with the Viltrox speed booster so I could use my EF lenses. The EF lenses that I partitioned for this camera were my 16-35 f2.8L along with my nifty 50 f1.8. So the M50 with those two lenses would primarily be used on my Ronin, of course, and that whole setup was just off in its own group. My other video camera was, of course, the Canon 80D, which, as you guys know, still works, minus the whole LCD screen issue. And this was basically the setup for the Canon 80D. I went ahead and attached the little small HD monitor onto this guy so I could see what the camera was seeing. And then I put the 70-200 onto the camera, put this puppy on a tripod. This was my static camera during the ceremony. This thing did not leave its spot. It looked straight down the aisle at my cousin Brian and his fiance, now his wife, Yasmin, during the ceremony to capture that classic part of the bride and the groom at the altar. I put this little rig together last night and it actually looks pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie. This is a fairly legitimate looking setup right here. I'm quite proud of my ingenuity here with this thing. So yeah, it was fun. And then finally, because I had my video setup all worked out, this was my photography setup. So just like how I use the M50 every day for video, I use the EOS R every single day for photo. So I'm fairly comfortable with using this thing for photography. I know where my thumb needs to be. I know where my index finger needs to be. My right hand and my left hand basically know this camera fairly well when it comes to photography. Furthermore, as I have been finding out, if you put a prime lens on this camera, look out, because it is an absolute god. And that's where the 85 f1.4 L lens came into play, because this was my primary prime lens. This was the only lens that ever was on this camera throughout the day. So that is basically the rundown of the gear that I was using. I only really used 3 lenses, 3 cameras. That is it. I didn't have a second camera person. I didn't have a second shooter with me. I was pretty much just by myself operating these 3 cameras. Every now and then I would maybe hand a camera off to somebody or hand something to someone just to hold it, but not to film, not to take the pictures, just because it was a lot right there. I didn't want to hand somebody something that they didn't know how to use and put that pressure, put that responsibility on them. Really, at the end of the day, it was just me operating and paying attention to these 3 cameras, which really was a bit stressful at times, but then you'd snap right out of it and you'd think, nope, you know this equipment, you know their limits, you know where you can push them. Use that information right there to get your shots, to capture those moments, to get those scenes as best you can. So I could go more into depth as to, you know, the settings that I use, the shots that I tried to get, and, you know, how my images look and how the footage looks. But I'll be honest with you, I have not really gone through anything. I looked at a few of the images here on the LCD. I ran through some of the clips that were here on the camera for a small ceremony, for just a couple of people, for a very small crowd, for something very simplistic. I think this did a really good job. I think that the setup, and I think that my plan of how I partitioned out certain pieces of equipment, if I were to go back and change anything, my number one change would be bringing a second person with me. Greg Sinclair, if you are watching the video right now, I probably should have brought you with me, but I think you mentioned something about work, and I think at that point that thought just kind of left my mind. So overall, I think this was a pretty good day. I think it was a huge success. I was a little nervous, a little anxious going into this, because this was my first wedding of the year. This was my first time doing a wedding in close to like 5 or 6 months, but I knew that since my last wedding, I have learned a lot in the realm of photography and videography, so I was ready to start putting those skills into practice. And that right there just kind of erased all the anxiety. It erased all of the nervousness and just made me focused on the job at hand. On top of that, I was happy to help out my cousin on his special day. But with that all being said, the biggest takeaway here is that if you are a wedding photographer or videographer or somebody looking to get into this stuff, if and in the event that somebody approaches you and asks you to do photo and video for their wedding, be very mindful of a few different things. How long is this wedding day going to take? Is it only going to be like 1 or 2 hours, or is it going to be an 8 to 10 hour day? Will it take the whole freaking day? You need to make a judgment call if you can handle doing all of that work, balancing both photo and video by yourself, alone, no second camera people, nothing at all, just yourself. If it is an 8 to 10 hour day, definitely don't do that all on your own. Unless you're confident that you can take that on all by yourself, bring somebody with you. Because doing photo and video for somebody's wedding day is a very important task. It's a very special day for the bride and the groom, for the families, and if you are in charge of all of those pictures and all of that footage, and it is more stuff than you know you can handle, pick one or the other, or bring somebody with you. This right here is a case where you can't always have both cake and ice cream. Moving forward, if I ever get asked to do this again and it is a small ceremony or it is a small day, I am definitely bringing a second person with me. Even though today was a really small ceremony, it was a really small wedding, a very small event, I definitely got some good stuff out of this, even though I definitely got some good pictures and some great video. I still wish that I had brought a second person with me, but nevertheless, it all worked out. I have a couple more weddings on my plate already for 2019. I think I'm booked for like another 6, I think. My next wedding is out on the Eastern Shore in May, and I'm kind of looking forward to that one. I think it's going to be another small ceremony, but it's going to be a longer day. And luckily, I'm only doing video for that one. Somebody else has the photography, and that reminds me I actually have to call those people tomorrow. So with that all being said, that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this one. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.